there, I'm Michele. I'm a licensed massage therapist in Washington, and I bring you MBLEx resources both here on YouTube and on my website. I have a bunch of free resources. I have practice tests, study guides, ebooks, courses for those of you who want to take a deeper dive into some of the subjects. And it's all going to be pinned in the description and in the in the pinned comment below this video. So yeah, I want to help you to tackle that massage and bodywork licensing exam with calm and confidence. And today we're moving on with our anatomy and physiology coursework. We're going into the immune system, and we're going to be, this is part of a whole series for the anatomy and physiology course that I'm building. And I wanted to give you guys access to this information as soon as possible instead of having to wait for the whole course to be finished, which has been taking me several months. So let's see. Today we're going to be talking about the immune system components and functions, the primary and secondary lymphoid organs, non-specific and specific immune defenses, B cells and T cells, the acquisition of immunity, and MBLEx practice questions. Now, regarding the whole topic of the immune system and how it works, there's a lot more to it than what I'm presenting. But what I am presenting is just what you need to know for the MBLEx. All right, so it's very simplified, just what you need to know. And then make sure and check out my lymphatic pathologies video. And I also have a whole course on pathologies because I'm not going to be talking about pathologies of the immune system in this video. So let's see, we can just go ahead and get started, but I want to make sure that you subscribe to the channel so that you are able to access this information as soon as I get it out. And also so that, make sure and like the video so that other massage therapists and body workers, future massage therapists and body workers have access to this information because that's how the algorithm works. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Your body's 24/7 defense team. The immune system is the body's constant protector, working day and night to recognize, neutralize, and eliminate harmful pathogens so every tissue and organ can function smoothly. Its complex network of cells, barriers, and biochemical responses keeps us alive by preventing infections, supporting healing, and maintaining overall health. For massage therapists and body workers, understanding the immune system is essential. Our work influences circulation, lymph flow, stress levels, and the body's healing capacity. Knowing how immune defenses operate help us make safe treatment choices, recognize when massage is contraindicated, modify our techniques for vulnerable clients, and support whole person wellness in a grounded, evidence-based way. So the components of the immune system, we've got the lymphocytes, which are the B cells and T cells. So those are the immune cells that live in our lymph. And then we have the thymus, which helps to mature those T cells in particular that lives under the heart. We're going to talk more in detail about that. We're going to talk more in detail about all these things. So lymph nodes, we talked about that in the last video. The spleen, which is over here in the chest cavity. The appendix, which is part of the digestive system. And then we have the mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. That means that lymphoid tissue that lives in the mucous membranes of our body. So we have the tonsils in our throat and the back of our mouth. We have Peyer's patches that live in the small intestine. So we'll go into more detail about that in just a minute, but let's talk about the immune system functions. This is an important question for the MBLEx. That's one that gets asked a lot, is the functions of each of these systems. So what does the immune system do? It protects and defends the body from foreign substances via general specific immune responses. So yeah, provides immunity, has generalized and targeted defenses. So non-specific, we have the first barrier defense, also known as innate immunity. And then we have adaptive defenses against specific viruses and bacteria. It returns the body to homeostasis after illness and trauma, and it's very strongly influenced by stress, emotions, lifestyle, sleep, and nutrition. Okay, primary lymphoid organs that we need to know. The red bone marrow is what develops our B cells and T cells. Actually, it develops all of our white blood cells, all of our lymphocytes. And then also the thymus is a part of that primary defense. So the B cells are produced in the red bone marrow, and they just go out and they provide defense. But the T cells need to go through the thymus first for further maturing, and then they can go out and provide defense. So now you know. Here's something interesting about the thymus is that it starts out being very large in newborns, and gradually it starts shrinking after puberty until there's pretty much nothing left of it by the time we hit old age, because we've already built our defenses by then. We don't even need it anymore. Okay, different kinds of lymphocytes that we have are the B cells, which are antibody mediated immunity. I'm going to talk more in detail about antibody mediated immunity and cell mediated immunity, the pathways for those, in the future slides here in the same show. But basically they have these prongs around, T cells and B cells have these prongs around them that identify the bad guys in your immune system and mark them, or they will, and they will memorize them, and then they will kill them or mark them for destruction. Then we have natural killer cells, which are all about the viruses and tumors, and they just attach themselves to the cell membrane and secrete some stuff that will destroy the cell membrane of the bad guys. Okay, so secondary lymphoid organs, of course, we've got the lymph nodes and we've got the spleen. So we know that from the last video on lymph nodes that the lymph nodes will filter the lymph, which is the fluid of our body that's not in the circulatory system, and it traps the pathogens. The pathway for that is all described in my video, the last video on the lymphatic system. And then for the spleen, it filters your lymph nodes, or it's similar, try again. The spleen is similar to lymph nodes, except that it filters the blood and traps the pathogens that way. And it stores platelets, and it removes old blood cells. So it's a filter for dead blood cells. It stores platelets for the rest of the body, but it also has lymphocytes that will help to filter any nonsense that's happening in the bloodstream. And then finally, we have these mucosa-associated lymphoid tissues that I mentioned. So there's the tonsils and the Peyer's patches. Like I said, they live in the lower digestive system, or the lower small intestines. They're embedded inside of there, and they filter out any pathogens that are coming through the digestive system. And then the appendix will hold a bunch of lymph tissue in there, and it can be bad news because it can hold a lot of germs inside of it, and it can be bad news if it busts, and that's why it's a big deal if that happens. So here's some images of the Peyer's patches. So this is a cutout of the small intestine, so we can see there's the contents of the small intestines, and then here we have the digestive tissue of the small intestine, but the Peyer's patches are embedded in the center, right inside of the smooth muscle tissue. So they're these little dots that filter bad stuff out. Then we have the tonsils here in this image. So there's palatine tonsils, and then there's, I can't remember what these are called, but it doesn't really matter for the MBLEx. But yeah, we've got a few different sets of tonsils inside of the back of our mouth. And then there's this spleen inside of the chest cavity. So let's just go over those nonspecific defenses, also known as innate immunity. It acts quickly, but there's no memory. It doesn't get better with repeated exposure. It's definitely compromised if we're not taking care of our bodies. So we have a set of defenses that are just always there that we were born with. So, I should just go over that real quick. Physical barriers, chemical barriers. So physical barriers would be our skin. Chemical barriers would be the chemistry on the outside of our body and on the inside of the body. And then we have the internal antimicrobial proteins, phagocytes, which are white blood cells that destroy or like chew up the bacteria or virus. And then we have natural killer cells. We have inflammation and fever to make the environment less habitable for pathogens. Okay, so let's start with the external barriers. We have the skin that's tough and keratinized, keratin. So it's hard it takes some effort to break through that skin for bacteria and viruses to get inside. We have mucous membranes, which will trap the microbes. We have cilia in the mucous membranes that sweep particles out. We have tears and saliva that wash away microbes. And then we have, for chemical barriers, we have sebum, which comes out of the skin. So does sweat. So they both have, so sebum is acidic, which keeps bacteria away. And then we have the antimicrobial enzymes, which are called lysosomes, that live in sweat. And then we have gastric juices in our digestive system that destroy pathogens. And then urine will wash out bacteria. And so vaginal secretions are very acidic, which will flush out and inhibit microbes from getting in there. Internally, we have a few different proteins that will create an environment that is not conducive for bacteria or viruses. So it's the first line of internal defense as far as nonspecific immunity goes. So before our white blood cells get to it, we already have the proteins in place. Interferons will slow down viral replication. So they interfere with viruses replicating themselves. Get it? Complement proteins enhance phagocytosis, inflammation, and direct microbe destruction. So complement proteins means that they are proteins that are there in the body, in the fluids, that help the white blood cells do what they need to do. They will help trigger inflammation, and they help with antibodies to be able to find those microbes to destroy them. Transferins are proteins that bind up iron because bacteria needs iron to be able to grow. And then we have peptides, antimicrobial peptides, that destroy the membranes of the microbes. So they just create an environment in general that keep microbes from being able to flourish. So regarding the white blood cells that we have and natural killer cells, we have phagocytes, which are the neutrophils and macrophages. I talked about neutrophils and monocytes in my video on the blood in the circulatory system. So there's a section on white blood cells and the different kinds that we have. So make sure and check that out. But those neutrophils and then the macrophages will engulf a pathogen, and the lysosomes inside of the plasma membrane chew up those microbes and destroy them. So monocytes is a specific kind of white blood cell, and they do transform into macrophages when they go into an infected tissue. So there are different kinds of macrophages. There are wandering macrophages that will just hang out in the bloodstream, and that's what I was talking about. And then when I was talking about in the circulatory system, and then there are fixed macrophages that just live in the bloodstream. So they both respond. Oh, yeah, that's right. I wanted to talk about the natural killer cells, NK cells. So they destroy infected or abnormal cells using cytolysis. Cyto means cell, and lysis means cutting. So they attach to a cell and secrete a chemical that destroys its cell membrane, as I was saying before. They are part of the innate immunity. They're all there in our bodies all the time and don't need any specific pathway in order to be able to work. They're just there. Let's see. And then for another set of non-specific defenses we have are inflammation and fever. So they contain the pathogens. And so with inflammation, we have vasodilation, which increases the capillary permeability in the tissue so that white blood cells can get in there. This is specifically important for an infection in the skin or any like surface level tissues instead of like a systemic one like a cold. So a cold would be better, a fever is better for things like a cold, a viral infection, because that fever will speed up your metabolism, and it also creates an environment that some germs don't like to live in. So that's the how bacterial growth is inhibited. Whereas with inflammation, it's just to a specific site. So now let's go over some adaptive, that is specific or acquired immunity. We're gonna have two different pathways we're gonna be talking about, and that's the antibody-mediated immunity and the cell-mediated immunity. So we're gonna talk about those, but it is a slower response, but it gets better over time because memory cells are created to remember that specific pathogen. So what we call foreign substances that trigger a specific immune defense, it's called an antigen. It can be a virus, it can be a bacteria, it can be a toxin, like chemicals in the environment, or it could be something that you're allergic to, like gluten or dust. So your body creates a pathway to deal with all of these things, and that's why sometimes we have issues with our immune system, with having terrible allergies, is because of our body identifying specific components in our system as being an antigen. So they have unique chemical markers, biochemical markers that are recognized by the B cells and T cells. So first we're going to talk about the B cells. The B cells, like I said, are the ones that are created in the red bone marrow, and they go directly into the system. They don't have to be matured in a second place. So what happens is the B cell's hanging out and it bumps into an antigen, and the antigen plugs into the receptor. The receptor would be these red doohickeys sticking out. That triggers a response that causes the B cell to divide into two different things. It can divide into a bunch of memory cells that will always remember that antigen. And it also divides into all of these antibodies. All these antibodies break off, and they go and they will mark a bunch of those antibodies. The antibodies will go and mark all those antigens for destruction, or they will neutralize them in some way. They have some kind of pathway. There's different B cells have different ways to neutralize or destroy antigens, but you don't need to know that for the MBLEx. All you need to know is B cell divides and antigens destroy, and then we have memory cells that will remember that antigen in the future and divide again when it needs to. Once again, these defenses get stronger over time. The more exposure that B cell has to that specific antigen, the stronger its reaction is going to become to it. And then cell-mediated immunity is where there's a second step involved. So we have our T cells. Those are the ones that have to go through the thymus to mature. So first of all, T cells are hanging out, right? And then there's this other macrophage that chewed up an antigen, that chewed up it chewed up a virus, right? And there's a little chunk of it here. And the T cell bumps into that guy, and it's like, here you go, watch out for this guy right here. I just chewed him up, he's out there. There's a bunch of them out there. And so that marker gets attached to the receptor on the T cell, and it divides into four different sections, 4 different kinds of cells. First of all, we got the memory T cells that will always remember that specific antigen that it was shown. Then we've got this cytotoxic T cells, which get divided, and they go out and do what needs to be done. They kill the infected cells. So they will kill the cells, and not the cells that are, they will kill the cells that are infected, and not necessarily like kill the antigen itself, but they will kill the cells that are infected. And then there are two different kinds of T cells that are also divided off. There are helper T cells that will help coordinate an immune response against that specific pathogen, but there are also suppressor T cells that get branched off, and they will stop the immune response when the pathogen has been neutralized. So it settles everything down. So we need suppressor T cells for sure for settling down the immune response. Okay, so, and then finally we're going to talk about the acquisition of immunity. As you know, we already have, this is an important point for the MBLEx, is innate versus acquired immunity. So innate are those non-specific defenses that I listed off, those the physical, chemical, the proteins, the phagocytes, fever, and inflammation. So those are the innate immune defenses that we have. But when we acquire immunity, the other set, we can naturally acquire them through exposure to germs in our daily life, and also our mothers can pass on antibodies in the placenta or during childbirth, or when we're nursing, we can get antibodies from our mothers in that way. And then so the active is when we're out and about and we're getting exposed. Passive is when we're getting it through our mother. And then artificially acquired immunity is all about the vaccines and the injection of antibodies. So active is a vaccination. So the dead or weakened pathogens are placed into our bodies, and our body marks those little bits through that process that I just described. This phagocyte is like, hey, watch out for this guy, and now our T cells know what to look out for. And then passive acquired immunity would be if we get antibodies actually put into our bodies that do the destroying. So we have like antivenoms and immunoglobulins that will actually do the work for us of destroying pathogens.
Okay, so here are our questions, MBLEx-style. Let's dial in all this information that we just absorbed. Which of the following best describes the role of non-specific or innate immunity? Non-specific, that was the first category that we talked about. So let's see, best describes the role. A, it targets specific pathogens using antibodies. B, it relies on memory cells for future immune responses. C, it develops only after exposure to a particular antigen. Or D, it acts as the body's first line of defense against any invader. You know, all of these sound like things that happen in the immune system. We went over all of this stuff. But the first line of defense is not going to be targeted antibodies going to a specific pathogen, or memory cells remembering things, or like only after exposure to a particular antigen. It's the first line of defense is that innate immunity that everyone is born with, and we just have in our bodies no matter what. So I'm going to go with D. It's the first line of defense, because that's the statement that is best for the role of nonspecific immunity, even though all of these things are also true regarding our immune system in general. So let's see the explanation for the reasoning of this question. It says that innate immunity includes physical and chemical barriers, phagocytes, natural killer cells, and antimicrobial proteins that protect against any pathogen. It is fast, general, and present from birth. Answers A, C, and D describe specific or adaptive immunity, which is antigen specific and involves memory. All right, next question. Which structure is considered a primary lymphoid organ where lymphocytes mature? So remember, we were talking about primary lymphoid organs and the specific lymphocytes that are created in those things. So remember, we were talking about starting with the red bone marrow, developing specific white blood cells, and how some of them will go off and do their own thing, that would be B cells. But then T cells need to mature in a specific organ. What was it? Was it the lymph nodes? A, the lymph nodes? Was it B, Peyer's patches? Was it C, the thymus? Or was it D, the spleen? So let's remember what each of these things do. Lymph nodes is what filters lymph and gets the microbes out of our lymph. Okay. Peyer's patches are in our small intestines, and they filter. They filter. They're kind of like they're lymph nodes that live in the small intestines, filtering pathogens and anything that we don't want in our bodies out of that. The thymus. There's only one thing that the thymus does, and that is creating or maturing our T cells. And then our spleen is for filtering blood, and it has lymphocytes in it as well. So I'm going to go with C. Here we go. There we go. C. I'm going to read this explanation. The thymus is where T lymphocytes mature. Those are primary lymphoid. That's a primary lymphoid organ. Red bone marrow is the other primary organ where B cells mature. Both of them start there. Lymph nodes, Peyer's patches, and the spleen are secondary lymphoid organs where immune responses occur. All right, next question. What immune response is triggered when a B cell is activated by a specific antigen? Remember the pathway of the B cell? Immune response that gets triggered. Ooh, we have a few different choices here. Remember, we had these names that we ran across in the slideshow. So A, cell-mediated immunity. B, antibody-mediated immunity. C, inflammatory response. Or D, nonspecific internal defense. Okay. Well, let's just pick this apart. Cell-mediated immunity means that there's going to be a lymphocyte that is going to show, it's actually a macrophage that's going to show the lymphocyte a bit of the pathogen that it needs to look out for. So that's what that means. Cell-mediated means that there is going to be another cell that shows them what they need to look for. And then antibody-mediated immunity means that antibodies are getting broken off of the B cells. So we always associate T cells with, I think the antibodies go and destroy the cells where the pathogen is, and the antibodies go and destroy the antibodies in particular. I think that's what the differentiation is. And then the inflammatory response is when we have our vasodilation, and that's actually a nonspecific internal defense. It's a branch of nonspecific internal defenses. So I'm going to go with B, antibody-mediated immunity, because the B cell breaks off when it finds an antigen. All of its antibodies break off, and they go and they do the work directly on the antigen. Let's see what it says. Activated B cells differentiate into plasma cells that release antibodies. This is antibody-mediated immunity. That's what that means. Cell-mediating immunity involves T cells. Inflammation, C, and nonspecific defenses are part of innate immunity. Okay, we got one more question here. Which immune structure filters blood, not lymph, and serves as a reservoir for platelets and red blood cells? So, filters blood and is a reservoir for platelets and red blood cells. So, A, lymph nodes. Well, we don't really have blood in our lymph nodes. We have lymphocytes in our lymph nodes. B, thymus. The thymus is an endocrine organ that matures our T cells. C, Peyer's patches are in our small intestines, and they filter pathogens out of our digestive system. And then D, the spleen, which is does have lymphocytes in it, and it does filter blood, and it does store red blood cells and platelets, and it also filters dead red blood cells and other garbage out of the bloodstream that we don't want. So let's see the explanation. The spleen filters the blood, removing damaged cells, storing platelets, and initiating immune responses to blood-borne pathogens. Lymph nodes filter lymph, A, And the thymus is for T cell maturation, that's B, and Peyer's patches protect the digestive tract. And that's it. That's all we're doing for today. And I hope this slideshow helped you out quite a bit when it comes to understanding the immune system and what you need to know for the Massage and Bodywork licensing exam. Be sure that you're subscribed so that you can be in the loop for the next videos that are coming out. And please like the video so that other future massage therapists can have access to this information. And with that, I'm going to see you in the next video. Toodaloo!